Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 139. Up the Long Ladder.
Top of the podcast to ye, and welcome to another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray. Alright, I'll quit. Geez, you're gonna talk, aren't you?
Do you promise?
What, that I'll quit?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay, in that case, I'm John Champion.
Each week on Mission Log, we follow the veritable rainbow that is an episode of Star Trek to its end, where, like a pot of gold, we look for messages, morals, and meanings, and find out whether it all sticks together. This week, me lucky charms. It's up the long ladder.
Promised you'd stop.
I'm not doing the voice, don't worry about it. But I am doing contact information. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. That handle again, Mission Log Pod, and all of those places. You want to leave us a voicemail, you can. You can call us, 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is missionlogpodcast.com. And do please remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. Can I tell you the hardest thing about doing that fake accent? Aside from hearing it, which I assume is dreadful.
Yeah, it's just as painful for me.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, but the hardest thing, though, is to not keep doing it.
Well, fortunately,
yeah,
I'm going to give you a little break.
Oh, because you got the trivia thing, don't you?
Yeah, Right. I'll do that. I do that for you and for our listeners.
You do that for our listeners, let's be honest.
Okay. So today's episode, Up the Long Ladder, was written by Melinda M. Snodgrass, she who brought us Measure of a Man, and who was mentioned by Will Wheaton as one of his favorite writers. Now, this was originally titled Send in the Clones. Gratefully, they changed the name. It was directed by Heinrich Kolbe. And we have a handful of missing scenes, which I will get to later. I think it's more appropriate to talk about those in the observations following the recap.
Can I play the Irish guy when we do those scenes?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. We have some great Easter eggs on the computer, and actually throughout the show. But in the computer in Picard's office, the list of ship names includes the SS Buckaroo Banzai, the HMS Lord Nelson, the Uri Gagarin, and captain names, which include Heinrich Kolbe and Melinda Snodgrass. One of the missions is listed as a diplomatic mission to Alderaan. So we'll have to figure out how that went. And going with the Buckaroo Banzai theme, with the SS Buckaroo Banzai, when they bring up the ship manifest for the Mariposa, it reveals that that ship is a DY 500 class. Now, Khan's Botany Bay was a DY 100 class, so same world there, but it was powered by a Yoyodyne fusion pulse. And Yoyodyne was a fake name, an aerospace company created by Thomas Pynchon for his novels V and The Crying of Lot 49, and then used in Buckaroo Banzai. Now, we got a very cool note from one of our listeners, Nate in Tokyo. Wow. Thank you, Nate. Who mentions that the Yoshimitsu computers that are mentioned by Picard reading the ship manifest actually comes back to play later on. The computers that Riker sees in the Mariposa colony actually have the kanji written out for Yoshimitsu computers.
Wait, was it the computers or was it the cloning machine?
Well, the computer is running the cloning machine.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
okay.
The kanji on top of that says that. Very, very cool. Now, the timeline in this is a little bit weird. They keep saying that the colonies are 300 years old. Now, by current retconning and generally accepted timelines, the Mariposa would have been launched about 240 years before the events of this episode, somewhere around there. So you can kind of put the pieces together however you like. By the way, kind of the top of the story, we are leaving Starbase 73, which is exactly where we were when Riker was making a terrible omelet and right before Picard met himself from the future. So all kinds of great things happen when you leave Starbase 73. Up the Long Ladder, we mentioned that as the episode title. Now, that is actually an old Irish saying. It describes a trip to the gallows, a long ladder to a short rope. And carrying on with the Irish theme, Bringloidi is the Irish word for dream. And let's recap the guest stars real quick. We have Barry Ingham as Danilo. Now, he made multiple appearances in Doctor Who, including the non-canon movie Doctor Who and the Daleks. Awesome. He appeared in 16 plays with Dame Judi Dench, and he is the voice of Basil in The Great Mouse Detective. We also have Rosalind Landor, who played Brenna. Now, she got an early start working as a child actor in England, moved on to TV, and then did a lot of voice work after her appearance in Next Generation. And finally, John DeVries, who plays Granger, actually he plays all the Grangers, started as a regular on the soap opera Ryan's Hope, and he went on to do a lot of TV guest appearances, including Miami Vice, The Equalizer, and Law and Order.
So DeVries, you say he played all of the Grangers?
Played all the Grangers.
Not just the lone Granger?
It is at times like this that I am reminded of a quote from the film Carlito's Way. Are you ready? Here comes the pain.
Prologue. Captain Picard has been sent information about a distress signal, a very old distress signal, that he shares with Commander Riker. It's something that would have been used on Earth, an SOS-type signal from centuries ago. Since the Enterprise is already near enough to the ficus sector looking for decorative plants, they'll go take a look. Also, Worf just passed out cold at his station on the bridge. Act 1. Don't worry about Worf. Dr. Pulaski says he fainted because he has the Klingon equivalent of the measles, probably after a trip to Kronosland theme park. Well, she tells Worf that, but Worf doesn't want anyone else to know. This is a childhood disease, and his pride would really be hurt if the others knew. So Pulaski does what any good doctor would, lies to the commanding officer about Worf's condition. He'll be fine anyway. Data tries to work out the details of the distress signal with Captain Picard. They find that a ship, the SS Mariposa, was launched in the year 2123 carrying a bizarre array of goods, computers and high-tech equipment, along with livestock and ancient devices like spinning wheels. Data figures that the colonists could have been followers of a post-World War III philosopher who advocated a return to a simpler life without technology. On the way to look for the colonies, Worf thanks Dr. Pulaski by letting her engage in the Klingon tea ceremony with him. It's not a thing for outsiders. In fact, it could kill a human, but Dr. Pulaski is curious and has an antidote on hand. Worf explains that the danger of the ritual is what brings Klingons together, and he recites a little poetry to mark the occasion. Arriving at the fifth planet, they do find life, the colonists, and Data finds that the sun is going through some tumultuous activity. The flares will surely destroy those beings living on the planet if the Enterprise crew doesn't act. It's a weird situation, though. There's no technology or a way to contact the people who are in danger. Riker will have to beam down with a landing party and explain what's going on and get them out of there. Deanna warns that may not be a good idea, but they've got to do it anyway. Once he's made contact, Riker calls up to start the evacuation, but it's not going so well. Picard doesn't care. He wants those people beamed up now. When the first group arrives, Chief O'Brien is surprised to see that he has beamed up the cast of a suburban production of Finnegan's Wake. Actually, who he meets is a group of very scruffy farmers with Irish accents and surrounded by animals and buckets and hay. It's like traveling third class on the Titanic, but with animals and buckets and hay. Act 2. The refugees are making themselves at home. A couple of hundred of them, plus the animals, are put into one of the larger cargo holds. Picard stops by for a visit with Worf after their ersatz leader, Danilo O'Dell, trips the fire prevention system. Danilo has a fiery daughter, Brenna, who is not fond of being on board the ship, but she seems intrigued by Riker. Riker reciprocates. Picard is not amused. Well, wait, scratch that. Picard is amused at the whole thing. Farmers, pigs, sheep, hay everywhere. The absurdity of the moment is not lost on him. Brenna is just worked up. She's got things to do, but she asks Riker where she can wash up. Her feet, to be precise. Being the good first officer he is, he offers to take her on a personal tour of the Enterprise. Danilo O'Dell has caught up with the captain with a quick question, though. He wants to know if they have caught up yet to the other colonists. Act 3. Yeah, others. So there's another Class M planet nearby, and Picard directs the ship to it. He presumes that this must be the descendants of those colonists who had all the fancy computer equipment on board the SS Mariposa. Down in his quarters, Riker is getting a lesson in how the colonists wash their feet. It mostly involves Brenna eyeing him seductively, then dropping her long skirt, followed by making out. Still not sure if she ever washed her feet. In the cargo hold, Danilo is going about the business of setting up a still to brew poteen. Knowing he'll start a fire again, he asks Worf for help, and Worf merely directs him to the replicator. First on the menu is some Irish whiskey. It'll do, but it's not great. Worf orders up something in Klingon, something very powerful, and that seems to do the trick. Just like Roscoe taking a drink of whatever those Duke boys were running, Danilo has the breath knocked out of him. In a moment, Brenna returns, though, and she sets her father back to business, this time arranging school for the colonist children on the Enterprise. On the bridge, Data notes that they have arrived at the other planet, and there is indeed a signal coming from it. Wilson Granger introduces himself to Captain Picard as the Prime Minister and invites his crew to come down for a visit. Riker, Worf, and Pulaski are ready to go, but Deanna urges caution. They're hiding something. Oh, Deanna, aren't they all? In the city of Mariposa, all is gleaming white walls and well-manicured and well-mannered people. Victor Granger introduces himself, the Minister of Health. He has a striking resemblance to the Prime Minister. All the people in Mariposa have a striking resemblance to each other, actually. Upon meeting Wilson Granger, Dr. Pulaski just blurts it out. She wants to know if all the people here are clones. Clones?
Clones?
Clones. Act 4. On board the Enterprise, Wilson Granger explains what happened. When the SS Mariposa landed, there was terrible damage. Only 5 of the crew survived, 3 men and 2 women. They were all scientists, and they knew they couldn't populate a whole colony. The only viable option was to turn to cloning. Over the many years, this new society, which had used drugs and punishment to curb sexual desire, finds the idea of physical reproduction repugnant. Cut to Riker, who is keeping it cool on the outside while his inner monologue says, "What?" The problem is that they will all die out. The more clones they make, the more opportunities for problems with the copies. All they need is some fresh DNA, and Granger would love it if the Enterprise crew could provide that. Riker's inner voice becomes much louder as he flat out refuses. So does everyone else at the table, and Picard says that's likely the same attitude Granger will get from everyone on the ship. Granger will return to his colony, but Pulaski will see if she can help from a medical perspective, and Geordi will tag along to address any of their equipment needs. Down on the planet, everything goes just fine, except for the part where Granger calls Pulaski and Riker into his office and then has them stunned and hauled away by his security team of Axel Foley clones. Geordi comes in looking for them, but Granger plays dumb. Cut to a high-tech lab where unconscious Riker and Pulaski are having long needles slowly pushed into their stomachs. A little time has passed, and the away team are back on board the Enterprise. Geordi stops by sickbay to find Pulaski and Riker and asks where they were. Well, they're perfectly fine, but now that Geordi asks, they are a little fuzzy on some details. They remember seeing Granger in his office, yet Granger told Geordi he didn't see them. Something is up. Dr. Pulaski does a scan of Geordi and Riker to find that Riker has some missing epithelial cells. So does the doctor. Riker wastes no time in beaming the 3 back down to the surface in the colony's cloning lab. There it is under glass, a not-quite-formed clone of Riker, and next to it a not-quite-formed clone of Pulaski. A couple of phaser blasts vaporizes both. Granger then enters the scene, too late to save the new clones, and accuses Riker of taking away their right to survive. Act 5. Let's recap, shall we? The Mariposans will die out in a few generations at best if they don't have fresh DNA, but there's nobody in the Enterprise who will volunteer to be cloned. Riker wants to destroy any samples that might have remained behind. What they really need is some fresh breeding stock to mix up the gene pool. Picard has another problem on his hands trying to relocate the Bringloidan population. So we've got people who need DNA over here, and we've got people who need a new home over there. Gosh, what should we do? Wait, if this didn't seem apparent at the end of Act 3, we'll spell it out for you now. The Bringloidans will be integrated into the Mariposan society to diversify the gene pool, thus giving everybody a better chance at survival. Plus, the Bringloidans will get computers, and the Mariposans will get pigs and hay and buckets. Picard's got it all worked out. Now he just needs to clue in his guests. It's not going so well. Danilo and Wilson hate each other. Then Picard drops the bombshell. It's cool. They can do what they want. They'll all be dead in 50 years, leaving behind an empty city others can come use. Danilo tries to appeal to Wilson. His people are hard workers and willing to learn. Plus, there might be some fun in reawakening those carnal desires they have eschewed for so long. Just to make things more interesting, all the women in the group will each need to have 3 husbands in order to propagate the species. Ew, gross. Danilo's totally down, though. Let's shake on it and go pick out some wives. Down in the cargo hold, the Bringloidans are getting the good news. Brenna is just slightly miffed at the idea that her personal and reproductive destinies have been spoken for, but she likes the idea of ushering in a new era for her people on a new colony, and the idea of the Prime Minister as one of her 3 husbands. The end.
Have we ever heard anything about, what's the word I'm looking for? Birth control? In Next Gen? Because I'm thinking Riker might have actually left a little DNA on the planet anyway. It just seems possible. It seems because that foot washing ceremony, seemed to be a bit involved.
It's an interesting question, though. You wonder if they have donors in the 24th century, because that's a thing now.
Yeah. Well, there is that too, right?
Yeah.
And also, yet another question. I understand he is the captain of the ship, but let's say, I don't know, you and I are down there peeling potatoes like we do on the old 1701D.
That's all we got.
Maybe one of us would be okay donating some of our genetic material. I'm not saying I would necessarily. I'm not saying you would necessarily. I'm just saying he just spoke for like 1,100 people or however many people on the Enterprise.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You got 1,000 people, and he's speaking for them for donating genetic material to be cloned.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they couldn't reproduce.
Well, no, it doesn't even mean they wouldn't want to be cloned, though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
because Riker's like, hey, not me. And Picard's like, oh, no. And Dr. Pulaski just shakes her head.
Yeah, and you're thinking, hey, more potato peelers. I got this.
Well, I'm not even thinking me necessarily. I'm just thinking, and Picard says, and I think you'll find that attitude prevalent throughout the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Oh, you think so? So you'd be cool with me asking everybody then? No, apparently not. No.
Nope.
I had a question because you of course have the DVD and you watch all the extra stuff and things. Was there any indication from Ms. Snodgrass that these were actually 3 different stories rolled into one? Because these feel like somebody had like a 15-minute idea for one episode of Star Trek, Worf getting sick and then the whole tea ceremony thing. And there was another 15-minute segment about whatever the heck was going on with the Bringloidi.
Right.
And then there's another 15-minute segment about the clones. And certainly the second and third segment tie in together. The first segment, though, it really just sort of felt like they had 3 ideas and couldn't get any of them to 48 minutes. And so then just like put them all together and sort of mashed them in.
Yeah, well, Worf's story literally has no bearing on anything.
It really doesn't.
Too bad, because it's an interesting moment, which I feel like we'll talk about. The short answer to your question is no.
Okay.
The longer answer to that question is to say that
no.
No, the longer version of the answer is to say that Melinda Snodgrass had a couple of ideas in the original version of this that she wanted to get across. So she wanted to address the idea of immigration.
Okay.
Which we will talk about for sure. And then when she was trying to express this, she said, it's kind of like you think about the Irish experience, people coming here and trying to assimilate into a culture, but also maintain a culture. And unfortunately, that's what it just turned into. And there were multiple rewrites after the fact that she felt like got away from her. So the original version of this would have been something quite a bit different. But yeah, that was not her original inspiration to make it the way this episode played out.
Which I guess you would actually get that impression. You mentioned earlier, and forgive me if I'm rushing you, but you mentioned earlier that there were missing scenes.
Yes.
Were these scenes actually filmed, or were these scenes that she wrote that just didn't make it to production?
They were actually filmed. I'll just very quickly go through what they are. First of all, we have Riker's reaction after his encounter with Brenna, in his quarters. And it's him going back onto the bridge, and he's just got that big Riker smile, and Worf says, "Everything okay?" And he's like, "Yep, everything's good. I'm sharing my DNA." Then you have, I'm glad they cut that. Then you have an extended version of Granger explaining the genetic problem to the assembled crew in the conference room. And then you have an interesting bit of Danilo, or Danilo, however you decide to pronounce it, telling the colonist history to the colonist children. So he talks about being dropped off by the Mariposa centuries ago, and then Picard realizing that the distress signal was left behind by the Mariposa to be triggered in case of emergency. So that was like a satellite. So those people on the planet literally had no technology. Or at least no advanced technology, but there was this satellite there to say, okay, just in case something on a planetary scale gets out of hand, this will fire. And then there's a wrap up at the end on the bridge. So you go from Brenna talking about the prime minister and marrying him. You go back to the bridge where they have a little tongue-in-cheek chatter about all the breeding that will take place, and Riker has a weird analogy about cats in a bag, and then Worf recites a little Klingon poetry, makes everybody uneasy. So no, there's not a lot of heavy extra morals, meanings, messages, or heavy story stuff that changes anything that happened here. Just some added detail. And that's why I wanted to save it for doing that now. So no, unfortunately, it doesn't save or dramatically alter what you were talking about as being kind of a story problem with this episode. And speaking of story problems, by the way, one of the things that's on the Blu-ray is the original preview for this episode, and it's hilarious that it has absolutely no mention of the first group of colonists, or the Worf story for that matter. It is just purely about stealing DNA to make clones.
Really?
That's it.
So the preview is all about the last 15 minutes of the show.
Yeah. And it's just, I can't remember if it was Ernie Anderson who did those previews at the time, but they're wonderful, and they're a distinct part of my childhood, where it's just like, on the next episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, a band of colonists steals DNA from the Enterprise to make clones. And then that's it. You're just like, wow, that's incredible. And then you turn it on and you're like, is this the right? Because there was a whole thing, yeah. I thought for a moment I would actually love to see an episode about the colonist children going to school with the kids in the Enterprise. Maybe not a whole episode, but a few minutes.
I didn't understand the point of that at all. How long are they planning on keeping them? Because they said they're going to take them. Right? They said they're going to take them to the nearest star base, right? But we know they just left the star base, so the nearest star base is not that far away. Kids are going to be on the Enterprise for maybe a day, and it's like, well, we need to get them in school. Come on, and that actually confused me, because then it's sort of like that whole. It's like the Amish kind of, in a way, right? Yeah. I mean, because are these kids growing up without any knowledge of future stuff? We're actually going to talk about Prime Directive in a bit and whether or not it applies to these people. I know it probably doesn't. But look, if they're going to be on board for like a month or 6 months, then I get it. But if they're going to be there for 12 hours, 24 maybe, hey, kids, school is postponed for a day. You know, I don't, because that's just going to raise more questions than you got answers for.
Well, exactly. It's not like just get out your iPads and do a lesson.
Right.
This is a computer.
Right.
Here's how it works.
Right.
You know? And then if I'm an 8-year-old and I just came from sleeping next to a pig and chicken, then I'm going to be like, I would rather stay here.
Exactly. That's what are they going to teach them? And then the kids, I mean, I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's that thing that the Amish do when they go to a certain age. Okay. So, I mean, is this sort of like an enforced one of those really quickly? Like are all the kids of school age from Bringloidi suddenly go through that, and then it's like, oh, except you don't really have the choice. All right, little 6-year-old Tommy, now do you want to go down on the planet and go through all that harsh stuff, or do you want to go back and play on the holodeck some more? I mean,
and he's like, yeah, but up there the floors clean themselves. Exactly. If I remember hearing Captain Riker or Commander Riker. Yeah.
Can I have more ice cream? Yes, just ask the wall. Really? Can I have more ice cream? Yes, just ask the wall. I don't know. I just can't decide.
By the way, so we got another cool note from a listener, this one from Alan, and he points out kind of the bad genetic mathematics in the episode. And I'm just doing a very cursory job paraphrasing here, but he actually did the math, and he said, out of those 5 survivors, you actually have multiple combinations. What you need to do is have offspring with every possible combination of that group of 5. And then you actually do have a very viable population. And in very short order, you can have a massive population. They should have gotten there and just seen explosive child growth, maybe population growth. Yeah.
Maybe they actually just didn't like each other.
Well, that's, I'm sure, very possible.
So I think we need to get no, we are not going to. I did the math, and we need to learn how to clone, because that is not happening.
I wondered about the tricorder being able to see a handful of missing cells, because I wondered, well, first of all, does it see a puncture wound? And then I wondered, wouldn't the transporter, if you're counting cells, wouldn't the transporter catch that? You beam back up, and the transporter goes, hey, wait a minute, did you leave something behind? Like part of your stomach lining?
I thought the transporter, though, was just trying to filter out anything bad.
It really is. It's just trying to filter out disease, viruses, bacteria and stuff. But I thought that was kind of a weird thing. Like, oh, here's the tricorder, and it just knows exactly how many epithelial cells you should have in your stomach, even though that cell layer turns over constantly.
Yeah.
It's just going to know. It's like, oh, look, you're missing cells. Well, hey, never mind that puncture wound that you and I both have in the same exact place that we didn't have hours before. We learned a new trick. That Geordi's visor is a lie detector.
Yeah, I know. And remind me, does he get to play poker with everybody?
Oh, you're right.
I think I would have been a little more careful about telling people that.
Yeah.
Especially the people with whom he plays poker. It's poker probably not a big deal, though. They will probably forget by the next time we see them sit down to play poker.
Ken is not the only one who can do accents, Ahem.
With the story and observations behind us, let us look now at some of the deeper issues in this episode.
So I found it difficult to attack this episode the way we normally do.
What?
I know. I generally speaking, I'll go through and I'll watch and I'll pull out this part. Like we have a way that we do the show, right? And I just found myself watching the show, picking out different parts, but not like, oh, well, this whole segment stands for this or this whole segment, whatever. I found myself making a list of interesting things, questionable things, painful things, and then actual issues in the show. So why don't we run through them sort of in that vein?
Well, let's do that, because my notes, I think, are a little more organic, like more the typical way that we would do a show. So I'm willing to just throw them in.
All right.
Whenever we kind of hit those points.
All right. So things that I found interesting.
Okay.
The European hegemony or hegemony, whichever.
Hegemony.
Hegemony.
Okay.
Hegemony.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. And it's once again Picard going, "Wow, read some history, would you?" Which he actually says to Riker in this episode. I mean, it's sort of an interesting idea. Nothing to it at all in this episode, but it's sort of an interesting idea. Sort of at the same time, I do kind of like the idea that the Earth had so many ships leaving that those ships could be lost, but the records still exist someplace. Because that's actually how Data found out who these people were likely to be, right? Or who these people were, which I thought was really interesting. Like, yeah, we got no record of any ship going this way. We have no record of any of this stuff. And Data's like, yeah, but somebody must have put stuff on that ship. And so that you can go back and find. That's how Wayland Industries, that's how like Wayland Industries ends up, you know, finding the aliens and coming back and all that stuff is keeping track of what's on what pallet. Well, never mind whether, you know, what the ship was called, the Oberon, the Nostromo, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Never mind what the ship was called, because that, you know, that money's already spent.
Yeah.
We're getting money off the stuff that we loaded onto it. So that you'll be able to track.
That's true.
Kind of interesting.
I've said it before that I'm kind of fascinated with the idea that the better and better computers get, and the better that computers get at being able to synthesize information, I think that's a useful historical tool. You know, the idea that you can look at things like receipts and bills and paychecks and memos and all, and really pull together like a complete picture of a person or an event. So I kind of go along with that here with what you're saying. You pull up the manifest, you can kind of paint this picture. So yeah, you know, Google can do anything, and it's even better in the 24th century.
Apparently so.
I was interested in the decision-making process on board the Mariposa 240 years ago, when the crew, you know, how that crew was decided and who to drop off where. And did they know that there were two planets nearby enough? Because we're the colonists, it's like, okay, well, we found two planets, so we'll drop you off and then we'll go on and do our thing. And I wondered about those who were following the back to nature life being left behind, and really with no technology. And it concerned me again about this weird thing of life in the 24th century where you have total freedom to live the life you want. And apparently the life you were given on Earth with its technological advancement is not that appealing to many people. You know, we have come across colonists over and over and over again who eschew what Earth has to offer. And here's another group of them. They've taken it to an extreme where they say, we're going to live like, you know, 19th century, 18th century farmers from Ireland.
Except they didn't leave in the 24th century, left in the 22nd century.
Well, yeah.
I don't know what the deal was that made the European hegemony grow.
Well, there was a world war.
Well, so my assumption is things were fairly bad.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, yeah, let's leave the planet. The thing is kind of crappy here. There's lots of radiation. We haven't even found warp drive yet, whatever that is. So, you know, or did they have warp drive? I guess they must have if they were that far out, right?
They had to have had at least, I think.
They can't have had warp drive yet, though, because now I'm jumping the timeline if I do that.
No. That's warp 5.
What?
Yeah. So the idea, and we're just going to...
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, so you're telling me that they would not have known that there was anything beyond what was on Earth at that point. They would know that they could go out and make other colonies. Otherwise, they would have no clue.
Yeah, they had to have known by 2123
right.
There are other planets that can support life, and they have at least enough warp drive to get there.
How is it they didn't bump into anybody else? The Enterprise can't go 5 feet without bumping into another ship. How is it these guys didn't see anybody all the way out to the edge of wherever it is that they went?
Right. Now, I sometimes wonder about this, though. The thing is, like, if it's not just more and more suburban and rural expansion, that will get eaten up eventually anyway. You know, there are those in the colonies who most certainly will want conveniences, or who will evolve out of their singular philosophical mindset. So I get it. Okay, Earth is just shattered and it's horrible, and we have this opportunity to leave. Cool. But once we get out, and once we've gone through a couple of generations of people who are maybe not all in the same boat with saying, yeah, we should follow this guy's prescribed lifestyle. We want something different. We're back to the ritual of Rumspringa. And do people then get to leave? It seems like you would have a much more heterogeneous group of people then.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So there you go. All right, more interesting things.
Worf getting the measles is actually kind of interesting to me. How would a warrior and the head of ship security deal with or feel about being felled by a childhood malady? We don't really address it. And then the suggestiveness of the Klingon tea ceremony between Worf and Pulaski is interesting as well. I mean, it really was suggestive because you said he recited a little love poetry. You said he recited poetry.
Well, she asked him to.
Well, but there was, I don't want to say there was flirtation, but it sort of felt like there might be there where he was like, so he says the whole thing about, the tea will kill you or it'll come pretty close to killing you. But that's the whole point, that many things, like death is a thing best shared. And then she says, you're a romantic. And he says, oh, love poetry isn't really love poetry unless you've heard it in Klingon. So then she goes and gives herself the antidote for the tea so that she can drink it. And then she says, now recite me some of that love poetry. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, wow. And cut. And nothing else about that. Again, maybe in season 3, something will grow between Pulaski and Pulaski and Worf. Who knows?
Oh, that would be beautiful.
That would be nice.
I mean, the thing is, like, even if you don't say that it's a romantic scene, it's still an incredibly intimate scene.
It is. That's true. And I'm not saying that there was anything untoward or even anything. I mean,
could be.
They're consenting adults. I mean, there would be nothing untoward about it. I'm not saying it was that, but yeah, there was a neat sort of like bonding sort of intimacy. Also, one thing you gotta love about Pulaski. She's up for just about anything.
Yeah.
Your machine friend is an idiot who is actually not your friend because he's just zeros and ones. But, you want to go out on the holodeck and play Sherlock Holmes?
Sure.
Let me get my dress. She's really, she's up for just about anything, which is kind of cool, including the tea ceremony thing.
And it's a great way to show cultural exchange.
Yes, perhaps.
If there's a theme to be found in this episode, there it is, and in a micro scale.
Hey, does that mean we can stop now?
Oh, that would be great. No,
go ahead.
We can't.
All right, go ahead.
And by the way, there is a parallel, I thought, between the tea ceremony and then the moment with Worf offering real alcohol to Danilo. If it were Picard, he would have given a speech. I mean, think about it. Danilo would have said, "Oh, we gotta make booze," and Picard's like, "Not on my ship." And then he says, "Well, what about that replicator? Can it make booze?" And then Picard would have had this long speech about, You can't just drink your problems away because we're more evolved than that, and we like to, take life's problems and blah blah blah. And
I don't think
like, no, seriously, I need booze.
I don't think that's true. I don't think Picard would have done that.
Oh,
I think Picard spent exactly as much time with those colonists as he wanted to, and if getting them drunk was going to get him away, that would have been absolutely fine with him. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of interesting. Worf says that all of the deleterious effects of the alcohol would be intact, to which Danilo replies that all pleasure has to be purchased by an equal amount of pain. And in the tea ceremony, he says, this tea is great, and it's this intimate, important ceremony, but it could kill you.
Well, not Klingons. It's not good for Klingons, but it won't kill them.
It's not good for them.
It'll get them near it, though.
If it's not good for a Klingon, then I don't want it anywhere near me.
Yeah, I wonder if Dr. Pulaski ended up holding Worf's hair later. Oh, why do we do this?
Maybe
this is the worst ceremony ever. We have special glasses for this. Why?
Right.
Sorry.
All right.
Sort of terrible. All right. So moving on to the questionable things.
Yes.
HIPAA laws are one thing. Lying to Picard is something else entirely. Now, because Picard calls and, so she tells him, you've got this childhood malady. And he's like, I don't tell anybody I have a childhood malady because I'm an adult now. I got the problems of an adult. I'm an adult now. And so then Picard calls. He's like, so what's up with Worf? And she's like, he didn't eat enough.
Yeah.
Now, maybe Picard should not call Pulaski on speaker. Because, think about it. Really, you only get 2 kinds of private conversations in Star Trek. I'm sorry, you get 1 kind of private conversation on Star Trek The Next Generation. That's a face-to-face conversation. Otherwise, if Picard says, hey, Dr. Pulaski, what's up? There's no telling who else is in the room with him when he's asking that question.
Right.
So maybe privately she should tell Picard. But I mean, there's no way that, especially after what Worf just said, it's kind of weird to me that she lies to the captain.
It is interesting. You could handle that very easily just by saying, "How's Worf? He's fine. I'll log a full medical report."
Yes.
And then that seems like...
Which will be riddled with lies, by the way.
Yeah, well, but it seems like that would be private information.
That's true.
Unless for some reason it had to be accessible.
That would fall into the HIPAA laws. You're right. You would think, unless we did away with those right after the Bringloidi went to the Bringloidi, actually. So kind of coincidental, that isn't it?
Yeah.
This is actually a question I think worth discussing. I don't know how big a one, though. Is there no concern for the rights of the clones? And I don't mean the clones that are, walking, talking, doing all the things they do. One's prime minister, for crying out loud. The ones that are developing, they land and they can, the clones are developed enough that they can tell which one is the Riker clone and which one is the Pulaski clone.
Yeah.
Right? And Riker just decides to kill him.
Yeah, he does.
Now, it's not, the thing is, I get it, it's his genetic material, but it's not, I mean, I don't know what happens here at this point. And I'm not sure. It reminded me a bit of what happened with LQ Sonny Clemens and Mr. Offenhouse and that lovely woman whose name I can't remember. If Data hadn't brought them back to life, they'd be dead, and that would be fine with Picard. He was okay with them being dead. Now that they're alive, they have to deal with them.
Yeah.
So I guess if the clones never come to life, we're not really killing them. But I mean, it was weird to me that, that actually could have been a completely different fork at that point. It's like, look at him. He's me. Granted, he can't see through my skin, but look at him. He's me. He's going to be something. He's going to be somebody. I don't know.
Well, okay. That's where you get into one of Melinda Snodgrass's other points with this episode. And she says that she got a lot of negative mail about this because of the pro-choice statement that the show is making. And she did that very purposely and very specifically. And she went to producer Maurice Hurley to essentially get his okay to do it. And she ran with it. She said, okay, here's my soapbox to make this statement. Now, all that said, okay, she's the writer. Good for her that this is a place where she is going to make a statement, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. That's her ability to do that. What is interesting from a production point of view, then, is how do you depict that? Because, as you said, Riker.
Okay, so say the words out loud. You're talking about pro-choice, pro-life, right? You're talking about an abortion issue. Okay, because that has not been stated to this point. And honestly, when he stands there and kills those clones, I'm still not thinking in those terms. It's not until Pulaski says the line, no, it's not. Riker says, we have the right to decide what happens with our own bodies.
Yep.
And Pulaski says, you'll get no argument from me.
Yeah.
But they're not their bodies anymore. And here's the problem that I have. This does not feel like the same issue to me. I understand you can sort of turn it into that issue. But look, I don't know what would have happened to those clones. If they had just turned off that machine, do those clones die at that point? Then this is analogous to an abortion issue, it seems to me, or a question of abortion. If, on the other hand, you turn those machines off and those clones are going to get up and walk around, yeah, okay, it actually is very much an abortion thing. I just can't believe I didn't hear it until that line.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that's where I was going with the idea of how do you depict that on TV?
Yeah.
Because if they went down there and what they saw was a petri dish full of jelly, and some scientists said, like, oh, yeah, this is your DNA, and we're going to replicate it over and over and over again, and then finally it'll be a human, you might have a lot less of a problem with Riker pulling out his phaser and saying, no, not with my DNA, you don't.
Right.
But what we have is a gelatinous thing that is actually in the shape of a Riker, and we can see his organs nearly fully formed on the inside.
How did I miss that until the line?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it is interesting that Star Trek, up until now, has had a very uneasy approach to cloning. It has pretty much always been nothing but bad news, no matter how you look at it. We did unnatural selection not that long ago.
Right.
And anytime we play with the genes of human beings, boy, it's just bad news.
It gave us the 50-foot Spock, though, and who doesn't love that?
I love a 50-foot Spock.
I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Hope we see him again.
Maybe. Get Simon Pegg on the phone.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the painful stuff? Or did we finish that? Because I feel like that's just a.
Well, no, you have it in there as a question because it's a question, not because we're going to say, and here's what Star Trek did. No, it's questionable.
It is.
I don't think there's much more to say about it than that.
All right. Painful parts. Okay. The Bringloidi.
Yeah.
I said in the original series that all knowledge of the Irish in Star Trek seems to have been gleaned from a box of Lucky Charms. Mm-hmm. And years later, it is the same old, same old. I mean, this is so wow.
I thought we were going to hear the Finnegan music from Shore Leave, and if we did, I was going to throw my computer at the TV, and there'd be no show this week.
Yeah, isn't it lovely? It's just fantastic. I can't remember if there were any of those long pipes that I think of in the stereotypical Irish things. Irish men are drunkards, which is true. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. I'm absolutely kidding. But yeah, just so many, even down to like the 1950s whiskey face. Like he takes a sip of that hard alcohol, and he does the whole.
Yeah.
And, pops the eyes and just, it's just bad.
I had a friend when I was doing theater in Chicago who he's a great character actor, but a really over-the-top character actor. He did a lot of children's theater because of that. Mm-hmm. But that was his style, and it was his style for that and also just sort of making jokes off stage. And I kept thinking, like, how interesting that this person who's my age, it seems like was only brought up on like a diet of the Soupy Sales show. And like that's his point of reference for doing things like the drunk act, Yeah. And we've said it before, like how terrible it is when you watch actors act drunk.
Yeah.
And here we do it again, and just all the lines about the beer and the booze, and it just felt like, okay, come on, we've hit that. We really need to move on and give them something else of a character.
Speaking of other characters, Brenna. Mm-hmm. Irish women are strong, and that's great. Mm-hmm. That would be a wonderful statement, because you could just say, well, women are strong at that point too. She's borderline battle axe. I mean, she's stereotypically strong. She is, well, you're a layabout and a loser and a jerk, and I hate you, but I love you. But I'm the one who does the work, and we all know this, and men just get together and drink and make decisions about the women, but the women are the ones who actually do the thing. And it just starts to sound like rote. I mean, it's just, the other thing, and there's one thing I like about her. She definitely owns her sexuality, which actually could tie in easily to the whole clone question that we were talking about earlier, if you're not going to call it a clone. But what did she spend like 7 minutes with Riker?
Yeah, well, that's why they call it the 7-minute Riker.
Yeah, not the full.
Yeah,
yeah. I just on the one hand, I sort of like the fact that she's a strong woman. She knows what she wants. She makes that available, and that's great. At the same time, readily available. It happened a little too quickly, and maybe that's because they were trying to jam so much stuff into 48 minutes.
And we don't know that they have birth control on their colony.
Yeah,
so
we don't. We don't know that at all.
Question. There were things where I kept going back and forth about my attitude toward Brenna, because, like you said, she's strong, and there's actually this nice moment when Picard says, because he doesn't overplay it, but at the very end he says, "Look, the decision is yours.
Right.
We can take you back to a star base, but they will need your strength." And that's cool. It's like an acknowledgement of her as a person, not just a breeding vessel, or like you said, the battle axe.
Right.
So that's cool. But then they kind of screw it up for me, because you end it with her saying like, "Oh, he's rich. One of my husbands will be rich. Oh, okay, then I'll stay."
Yeah. Well, no, it was actually because she'd have to leave her da. That was the reason that she wasn't going to go at all. And then once she accepts the fact that she's going to be there, then she's going to make the best of a situation that she's probably not going to find the worst in the world. It's just she didn't get to decide for herself, or it wasn't her idea.
Yeah. No, I just kept thinking, thank goodness Picard made that offer, and I hope he made it to everybody.
Yes.
Because again, if I'm an 8-year-old and I've been raised, in hay, I'm going to say like, no, you guys have like carpet. What is this? I love it.
What's that like? Oh, air conditioning, you call that. That's really interesting. That's pretty cool. Speaking of things that they should know the name of and they don't. So tell me about this computer. Come on, dude. There were computers on the Earth in the 21st and a half or whatever time they left, 2100 something, I understand not knowing how to work a computer at that point, but not having heard of one is absolutely preposterous.
They got there on a spaceship.
Yes, you know? which of course, from the cutout scene, we know that they can actually tell the story of that spaceship, so it's not like they've forgotten that they got there on a spaceship.
That's the thing, and I would wonder if we would really forget who we are and where we came from in under 300 years. I mean, I've never actually crossed the Atlantic in a wooden ship, but I know that some of my ancestors did, and I have a pretty clear picture in my mind of how that happened.
Yeah.
You know, I also have a pretty clear picture in my mind of how people lived 200 years ago versus 100 years ago versus 50 years ago.
Yeah, see, here's the problem, though. I'll bet you've got one of those, like, just sort of fake ideas. I'll bet you've got, like, one of those Disneyland ideas. I'll bet you've got one of those Bringloidi ideas of how people lived at a certain time.
Right.
One other questionable thing. So the Prime Minister says, we want your genetic material. And Riker says, no way. And he's like, okay, well, will you just come down to our planet and do something else then? And, you know, don't bring security and don't worry because, you know, there's only like 8 of us or 5 of us or however many. And that just struck me as dumb. And then on top of that, why did they not want Geordi's genetic material? I really think it's just because it's bad writing. Because we don't find out. They've got a Tantalus device down there, by the way. Why is it that Riker and Pulaski aren't even aware of any missing time?
Oh, my God, you're right.
Yeah, so they've got something down there that's going to erase their memory, not just take their epithelial cells. And then, so why even take Geordi, or why not steal Geordi's DNA? Because we have to do some sort of Columbo thing of like, well, I asked them about you, and they said that they hadn't seen you, but you're saying you saw them? This is a mystery. And there's so much about that I don't understand. Like, Geordi's like, so have you seen Commander Riker and Dr. Pulaski? And the guy's like, nope. And at that point, he should actually be on the comm to the Enterprise saying, can you locate Commander Riker and Dr. Pulaski? But he doesn't do that, doesn't report it to security. And then he apparently went back to the Enterprise without knowing where they were either, because it's not until he's talking to the two of them later that he's like, so what happened to you guys? Well, they didn't beam up together, apparently. So really, like, with 3 people go down, one guy comes back, that one guy's not going to be concerned. They'll find their way home.
Right.
That's all right. So that's it for the questionable stuff for me. Shall we move on to actual issues?
Yeah. I feel like we've hit a couple, but there are more to go.
I guess so. Well, I mean, some of them are like just like plot holes, and some of them are actual issues to discuss. I apologize. Like, why would Picard not let Riker finish his sentence? But Captain, it's bad writing. I mean, it's because they have to get all these things up onto the ship, and obviously Riker is going to say, Captain, I really must insist that you let me finish my thought. Because you're going to want to know what we're beaming up.
Yeah, you're telegraphing. Well, you're doing 2 things. You're telegraphing urgency to the audience. Yes. And then you're also going out of your way to set up a joke. Yeah. And both of those are unfortunate.
Yeah. Why not just put the Bringloidi in the holodeck? Or all 4 holodecks? Yeah. Because they got no clue. Right. Yeah. I mean, and even if you tell them, look, it's going to be just like what you know at home, because then they can pick up the flint that seems real but isn't actually real, and start a fire that seems real but isn't actually real, and cook food, which, because of the way the holodeck works, will actually be food that will feed them on the way there. And pretty much none the wiser, right? And they go and then they never get asked about the other colony, and that other colony ends up dying because they don't have the clones. But I didn't understand why they put them in the hangar bay or whatever.
And then the holodeck reports back to the captain. No, they really did kill a pig. Yeah, like, we had all this holodeck stuff, but no, they really did kill a pig.
That's kind of interesting. Or either that, or you say,
had to clean it up.
Oh well, I'll tell you what, we're going to beam you into this place that we call the holodeck, and we'll beam your animals separately. They just beam their animals back down to the planet. Because you can't have them killing them there or let them die on the planet,
on the planet.
Once the sun eats them, exactly. Curious about where the Prime Directive is in any of this. Maybe it's not an issue because they're Terran, and that's okay. But this goes actually to the question about sending the kids to school with the Starfleet kids. I mean, are they joining Starfleet now? Are they coming back to the Federation, which I guess didn't even exist when they left? If not, I don't understand why we're sending the kids to school with the ship's children, but we're showing them a lot of stuff. Look, their great-great-great-great-grandfathers decided 300 years ago or 240 years ago, we're going to go off and we're going to do this thing, we're going to start this new colony, and that was their choice. 300 years later, all these people are adults now, and they've never seen a computer, but maybe they like it better. You know what I mean? It struck me, there's a little bit of a prime directive. It seems like there might be a question of the prime directive here.
Well, I didn't think so. I mean, simply because they are colonists from Earth. So it's, if the British Army showed up tomorrow and said, "Oh, no, we're taking you back," even though you were colonists and then you had a couple of hundred years of free rule on your own, now we are taking you back. Sure, there would be a problem there. But again, if you know anything at all about your own history, you have to know that, okay, you came from somewhere, and that other place and those other people presumably still exist, even if the original planet doesn't. Well, the other colonists who went away, they presumably still exist. And there are technologies out there that exist that could, if they could get us here, they could potentially get us back. So I think the prime directive here is a different thing from asking whether or not they're now being brought into the fold of Starfleet or the Federation. The prime directive just says, like, if it's not your business, it's not your business. Stay out of it. In this respect, in this way that we're talking about the prime directive. But they are our people, even if they were removed by several generations. What you're asking, that's the political question, though, which is really interesting, is how do you then assimilate that back into the Federation? Or do the rules just basically say, okay, look, this is how they set out to live their lives. They can continue to live their lives, or we give them the choice to go live with the Mariposans, which, they'll be faced with all this new and wonderful technology they had no idea about. But if they didn't want to, we would then just, I guess, be obligated to drop them off at a planet of their choosing where there's nobody else, where they could have have this agrarian lifestyle, and that's, I suppose that's fine, but I think the missing piece is you still have to have technology and scientific knowledge to do that, because you still have to find a place where they don't beam down and immediately die by eating the poisoned apples.
Oh, no. Brenna can take care of that.
Okay. All right. Good.
I don't know if you picked up on that, but she can pretty much do anything.
It's not a question of like ownership or even meddling, but it's a question about sort of the political identity and the kind of cooperation that you have or don't have from that point forward. I think at a certain point all bets are off. Like they did come from Earth. At least they know that, and it's not out of the question that Earth would continue to develop, or at least the other colony would continue to develop. And there may be good reason, like, I don't know, an exploding sun, to need to come back.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Another issue with the clones, and this time I'm going to treat the clones just like clones rather than as a stand-in for something else.
Okay.
Although I guess they kind of are. Riker says, one William Riker is unique. 100, 1,000, that diminishes me in ways I can't even begin to imagine. And the Prime Minister says, you would be preserving yourself. And Riker says, human beings have other ways of doing that. We have children. We honestly could probably... Okay. How is Riker diminished by another Riker? Or 3 other Rikers, or 5 other Rikers? I mean, if they're there, we never know about it. Logically speaking, and I say logically because Spock knows that there's a 50-foot Vulcan someplace.
Right.
Logically, Spock is no less Spock because there is another Spock out there. And I'm not even talking about, stuff that might happen when we're done doing this podcast 1,000,000 years from now. I'm talking about in the cartoon, between the original series and Next Generation. Spock is aware that there is another Spock out there, but it does not diminish who Spock is. And if you're having a child to preserve yourself, please find something else to do with your time. That's not the reason to have a child. And
you're absolutely right.
Now, I say that as somebody who does not have a child, but here's the thing. We all know I want to put myself into a robot body. I'm all about preserving myself. I never once thought, something that looks a little bit like me that I'm going to eventually want to control and probably screw up, for their life. That's not the way to preserve myself. I was actually kind of horrified by that line.
Yeah, well, okay, so think about the vast chasm that you've created, not you specifically, Ken.
No, I did it. It was me.
Okay, but the chasm between the Bringloidi and the Mariposans, where you have this vibrant and creative and headstrong culture of farmers, and you have these just boring and antiseptic technocrats living in their world. Mm-hmm. And it's gotten so bad that those elitist technocrats don't even have the idea of, say, art to preserve oneself. Mm-hmm. Or history, poetry, creativity, these other things. It is kind of a weird, well, it's a very weird line that Riker says human beings have other ways of doing that. We have children, because the other way to say that we preserve ourselves by doing. We preserve ourselves by leaving something behind. Mm-hmm. We preserve ourselves by doing all these other great things that they are so completely and utterly removed from. It's a weird take on technology run awry that Star Trek does from time to time, when you see these people who are totally dependent upon their technology and have no other outlet, not even sexual, and not creative in any way.
The Irish have weathered some difficult times throughout the centuries. But can they survive up the long ladder?
Ken, I feel like we haven't gone on too long. I feel like we've gone on just enough, and maybe there's even more to say, But I feel
I'm just going to jump straight to it. I'm sorry. This is one of those episodes that I referenced a week or two ago. A bad episode that yields lots of conversation, because that's a bad episode. This is just a bad episode.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. I think this is one of those rare but cool episodes where we get to say, okay, there's so much that makes us cringe. Do you remember what I texted to you a couple of weeks ago when I first rewatched this for the show? What did I say?
Words, honestly, that I never thought that I would ever hear from John Champion.
Okay.
Up the long ladder makes me want to kill Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And I will say,
watched it honestly, 3 more times.
Watching it again, because the first time I watched it, I was just like, no. Really? No. No. Going back and watching it a time or two again to know that we're going to pull stuff out, there really is a lot of interesting stuff going on here. There are a lot of really interesting topics here.
Absolutely.
I'd rather read the comic book. I'd rather read the novel. I'd rather just think about those topics and not even put the Star Trek layer over it, because it just... Can I tell you the only way that I thought that the Bringloidi worked for me, mm-hmm. or the Bringloidin or whatever, mm-hmm. The only way they work for me, I actually put them, if I could put them in the same category as a piece of the action. Mm. Though if memory serves, I don't remember thinking that a piece of the action worked either. I know it's a fan favorite, but I want to say I thought that was kind of weak for kind of the same reasons. Maybe the only movie that survived whatever happened to the colony on the way out was Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Or maybe,
perfect.
Or maybe, maybe something happened to make them think, because look, when they left here in 21 whatever, unless something radically strange happens in Ireland, like unless the ley lines surge with power and a rift opens up between our time and a couple 100 years ago, people in Ireland aren't like that today. I know. No. I've met at least 3 of them.
It is. I mentioned the dinner theater show Finnegan's Wake, and I kept thinking it is a worse Irish stereotype than Division Street in Chicago on St. Patrick's Day. There is not a Pierce Brosnan or an Oscar Wilde in the bunch, not even a Bono. I'd settle for a Bono.
I'd settle for a Bono. That's actually, that's a great line. That's a great line.
We'll put that on a T-shirt.
They're worse Irish stereotypes than My Open for this show, which was terrible.
Yeah.
My Open for this show was horrible. And yet this show...
But here's the thing. I actually do like the idea of the Enterprise crew having to deal with people that aren't like them. And specifically, with people who are more like us. You know, the crew are heroic and too perfect in many ways. And when they have to deal with people from, say, the 20th century, like in the Neutral Zone, we got a little more acute look at how we are different and what the values are that take place in Star Trek's world. You know, what are the things that we are saying in this more perfect, more evolved future are something to strive for? Then when we get to hold up something else, we get to say, okay, well, here's the gap, and maybe here's a little bit of how we build that bridge to cover that gap. So I like stuff like that.
It's interesting, though. Picard's only able to do that when they're comical, because he hated Offenhouse. I mean, he acknowledged that Offenhouse was right, but he and Riker both were just like, I mean, the three 20th century people. Yeah. LQ and Offenhouse and that lovely woman whose name I still forget. They treated them like something they stepped in. I mean, they treated them absolutely terribly. But then, you know, show up with a pipe and a mug and a brogue and a desire to marry off your daughter to anybody standing. Well, then it's cute. And then, sure, we can help these people because they don't offend me. I mean, I don't know. But
there's just so much to dislike here. I mean, and I hated the cookie cutter gender roles, like you mentioned, the industrious women who do all the work, but they also nag, and then the drunkard idiot men who don't do anything. It was just...
It really is. It's honestly too bad about Brenna, too, because she could have been a great character. She could have been a great character, and she could have been a strong character. But... She could
have been a leader. She really could.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
If you had introduced that idea to the Mariposans earlier.
Yeah. But, nope.
Yeah.
Just nope. Just
no. Hold up. No. But we got messages, I bet.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the whole thing about, I think you were just alluding to it, the whole thing of working with people who are different than you. I mean, working with, even if they aren't, I don't want to say on the exact same level because that makes one better than the other. But I mean, you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to be same for things to go well, right? In fact, everybody shouldn't be, because if you end up in just the one line of thought, if you end up in just the one course of action, look what happens. I mean, their whole colony was going to peter out.
Yeah, I mean, Picard actually says the line to Granger. Well, a Granger. It is our differences. It is our differences that have made us strong.
Right.
So that is the message. We have to work together. We have to get past the unfair stereotyping, like say unfairly stereotyping the Irish. We're better off.
I don't know though. That's funny, dude.
Okay, well, that's the last acceptable.
All right. Sorry about that.
But we're better off and we benefit from each other's diversity. So yeah, that's a message there. And I respect the idea that Melinda Snodgrass started from that premise, saying like, how do you integrate cultures that are so vastly different and do something interesting like keep cultural identity, but still work together. Unfortunately, the story here went off the rails and the depiction went off the rails too. Yeah. Another message, sex is awesome. And another message, I think, that is the unintended, it's that if you have technology, you will become evil and stagnant. And if you live off the land, you will become an eccentric alcoholic.
Well, I don't think that's a message for everybody. I think that just happens to be what happened to these people. I do have one other question, by the way.
What's that?
What happened to the Mariposans, Brogue? Were they all from Ireland, or was it like this group of Irish? Was it the Titanic, actually? I mean, I know you joked about it earlier, but was it the Titanic?
Well, see, that's kind of how I felt about it. Because when it played out like that, I kept thinking, here's a giant cargo hold with all these animals and farmers who are really just putting up with the idea that they are on a ship, just hoping to not interact with anything other than their animals and their chosen life. I mean, it really is. There is kind of a weird cultural religious thing that you could make out of it if you went like a darker way, to say that it is this single-minded, almost cult-like mentality. Because I pictured them on this ship 200, 300 years ago, just not even wanting to participate, not wanting to go to the bridge, not wanting to know any of that. And then here you have these few elitist technocrats. Well, they became the few elitist technocrats who are actually running the show, who are saying, okay, well, we're heading out, but we'll take you too.
Yeah.
Because why not? Because Earth is in tatters. So I always did picture it as a big separation like that from the beginning, and it just got worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it,
Right. It's one of those things, again, where I would love for us to write the 3-hour episode that would make this 44-minute episode work. What is it? Fan film. We'll do a fan film. Well, no, we'll do a fan film. Come on.
Oh, great.
I don't have time to read all this. I'll just write it and produce it and help you edit it. And
Good. Okay.
Yeah. That'll take much less time.
Yeah. So there are messages that hold up. I say, why not?
Yeah.
We live in a world where immigration is a hot button topic. And I don't know if you read the newspapers, but it is.
Nope.
And even just on the micro level, we live on a day-to-day basis making even subconscious judgments about the abilities and the value of those around us. So, yeah, we get to step out of that a little bit in a fictional context here. So those messages, sure they hold up. But gosh, it will not be too soon if I have to watch this episode again. Yes. It actually won't be too long away.
What did you keep saying about the Packless? Maybe we'll see the Mariposans again someday, John.
Maybe
we will.
I yearn for a Packlet. Bring me a Packlet, please. Please.
Yeah, because the Mariposans make you weak.
Yeah.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Find more information at roddenberry.com. And all the other cool stuff that they have there. Are they still doing that thing where you can send in messages about what Star Trek means to you?
They are. Yeah. The fan census. So you can check that out and you can be on a video. It's cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, be sure to check out Trek FM. That is trek.fm. For the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com. And, of course, be sure to visit roddenberry.com because my cadence indicated there would be something else, even though there was not.
Ken, there is something else, though, because next week we get to do it all again with Manhunt.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Fare the well, Bringloidi. We will probably not see your like again. If we are lucky. End transmission.